It was supposed to be a short break, just a bathroom stop on a long drive through the mountains. But as I stood at the dusty gas station off Highway 85, minutes turned into hours. I was alone. My son, his wife, and my two grandchildren had driven off without me. I didn't realize it right away. At first, I just thought they were taking a while. Maybe Emma needed the bathroom too, or Tyler wanted a snack. I sat down on the wooden bench beside the vending machine, watching the dust swirl under the gas pumps. The mountain air was thin but warm, and the quiet almost fooled me into thinking I was safe. But minute by minute, something inside me shifted. Doubt crept in subtle and slow, like a fog rolling over my thoughts. I stood up, walked to the edge of the lot, craned my neck to see if maybe they had parked somewhere else. Nothing. I called Marcus, straight to voicemail. I called again. And again. My hand was shaking now. I texted, "Are you guys okay?" No response. That's when the truth hit me. Not like a slap, but like a slow crushing weight pressing down on my chest. They left me. Not by accident. Not because they forgot. They left me on purpose. I felt my knees weaken as I sank back onto that bench. My heart was pounding not from panic, but from betrayal. A betrayal so deep it didn't even make me cry at first. Just silence. A numb, gaping silence. There were families passing through, people getting gas, laughing, road tripping, with loud music and snacks. None of them noticed the old woman alone with a small rolling suitcase, holding her purse like a life raft. I wasn't Ruth, their mother, their grandmother, the woman who made birthday cakes and knit scarves and wiped their tears. I was just another old lady at a gas station. Forgotten. What did I do so wrong? Was I too needy? Too watchful? Was helping them financially a mistake? No. I gave because I loved them. I gave from my heart. But what I got in return was a kind of silence that screams. 3 days later, I'm still sitting at this very spot, not physically, but emotionally. That's when I stumbled upon a viral story online about another elderly woman being abandoned at a rest stop by her family. People were outraged, but my blood ran cold because I wasn't just reading that story. I was living it. 3 days later, I'm still sitting at this very spot, not physically, but emotionally. That's when I stumbled upon a viral story online about another elderly woman being abandoned at a rest stop by her family. People were outraged, but my blood ran cold because I wasn't just reading that story. I was living it. I am Ruth. I am 70 years old, and this is the story of how my own son left me behind and how I decided to take back my power. It all began 6 months ago when my son Marcus called me crying. He said Rebecca had lost her job. The mortgage, school fees, and bills were drowning them. I remembered the little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees, sobbing for comfort. How could I say no? So I transferred $80,000 from my late husband's insurance payout. But I wasn't entirely naive. I asked for a written agreement drafted with my lawyer. Their house would be collateral. Marcus agreed, grateful, or so I thought. At first, they called me every Sunday. They shared updates about Rebecca's job hunt, Emma's artwork, and Tyler's soccer games. I felt good, useful, wanted. But slowly the calls dwindled. Their voices became distant, and my gut told me something was off. That's when I booked the flight to Denver unannounced. I imagined their surprised, happy faces. I packed gifts, a sketchbook for Emma, a soccer ball for Tyler, homemade cookies for everyone. It was supposed to be a warm visit. But when I arrived, the shock on Marcus's face wasn't joy. It was panic. Rebecca stumbled over excuses, dinner party plans, art classes, soccer games. Every suggestion I made to spend time with my grandkids was brushed aside. Then the tension escalated. I brought up the money, the new car in their driveway, the dinner party guests. Marcus became defensive. "We're grateful," he snapped, "but that doesn't give you the right to monitor us." That night, back in my hotel room, I felt the crack in my heart widening. I hadn't just given them money, I had given them trust, and they had spent it all. Still, I wanted to believe. So when they offered to take me on a weekend road trip to the mountains, I said yes. One last try to fix this. And that's how I ended up on Highway 85, abandoned, forgotten. But they didn't know I had the deed to their house. And they definitely didn't know I was done being the helpless one. 6 months before the gas station incident, Ruth sat in her modest but cozy apartment in Phoenix. She was sipping chamomile tea, her favorite, and flipping through a novel when the phone rang. It was Marcus, her only son. His voice cracked before he even said hello. "Mom, we're in trouble." Ruth immediately sat upright. It was that tone. The same tone Marcus used when he was a boy and lost his dog, or when he was 17 and wrecked the family car. "What's going on, Marcus?" she asked, heart tightening. Rebecca, his wife, had lost her job. The mortgage was overdue. School fees were piling up. They were drowning, he said. And if they couldn't make a payment soon, the bank would begin foreclosure proceedings. Ruth listened quietly, her heart sinking. She remembered the times she and her late husband struggled financially, scraping by with food stamps and late notices. Her son never knew hunger, but she knew what desperation sounded like. "How much do you need?" she asked. Marcus paused. 80,000. The number hit her like cold water. That was nearly all she had left from her husband's life insurance payout. But he was her son. "I'll help," she said, "but I want it in writing. And I want the deed to your house as collateral." There was silence on the other end. "I'm not trying to control you, Marcus. I just need to protect myself. I'm on a fixed income." He agreed, albeit reluctantly. For a brief while, things seemed hopeful. Marcus called her weekly, giving updates. Rebecca was applying for jobs. The kids were doing well. Ruth even received photos of them painting Easter eggs and playing soccer. It warmed her heart to think she'd made a difference. But something felt off. Slowly the calls became shorter. Updates turned vague. Then weeks passed with no word. And so the seed of doubt took root in Ruth's mind. She didn't want to think ill of her own child, but a quiet anxiety began to stir, a whisper that she might have made a terrible mistake. I booked the ticket on impulse. No phone call, no email, just instinct and worry. A quiet voice inside me whispered something was wrong, and I needed to see it with my own eyes. The plane touched down in Denver on a cloudy afternoon. My suitcase was small, but filled with meaning, a sketchbook for Emma, a soccer ball for Tyler, and a tin of my oatmeal cookies tied with a red ribbon. They used to love those. As the cab pulled up in front of Marcus and Rebecca's house, my heart beat faster. This was supposed to be a joyful surprise. A mother coming home. I stepped out. The lawn was trimmed, the flowers blooming, the front door freshly painted. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. I rang the doorbell. It took a long time. When the door finally opened, Marcus stared at me as if I were a ghost from another life. "Mom." His voice cracked. Before I could answer, Rebecca appeared. She froze. Then she forced a smile. "Ruth." What a surprise, but it wasn't joy. It was panic, dressed as politeness. What she found shook her: a newly renovated home, luxury decor, and a brand new car. It was clear now that their financial desperation was a carefully crafted lie. The warm family calls and weekly updates had just been smoke and mirrors to manipulate her. Inside, things got colder. Rebecca mumbled excuses. Kids were at practice. A friend was coming over. They were just about to head out. Every minute, I felt more like an intruder than a mother. I handed them the gifts. They barely looked. I offered cookies. Marcus set them aside without a word. I glanced around. Everything was pristine. Too pristine. A new car outside, a designer lamp, laughter from another room. But no grandchildren. Where are Emma and Tyler? I asked. Busy, Rebecca said too quickly. And I realized this wasn't my home anymore. I laid awake that night, the ceiling of the hotel room staring back at me like a blank answer sheet. My hands rested on my chest, but my heart wouldn't stop racing. I had come hoping for warmth, for a family dinner, for laughter echoing in the kitchen. But all I received was a cold silence, broken only by forced politeness and shifting eyes. I kept going over the details, the new car, the designer furniture, the way they looked at each other when I mentioned the money. That's when it hit me. They never planned to pay it back. They took it because I offered it out of love, and love to them was a currency with no return policy. I felt small, foolish, like an old woman who had mistaken her past importance for present worth. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was that I had believed in them. I raised Marcus with everything I had, bandaged every scraped knee, stayed up during fevers, worked extra shifts to buy him his first guitar, and now he looked at me like a burden, like a problem that had come back at the wrong time. But something changed in me that night. The pain didn't disappear, but it stopped paralyzing me. I sat up. I looked at my suitcase in the corner. I thought of the legal documents in my bag, the deed. They thought I was powerless. But I had just enough power to remind them who they were dealing with. Tomorrow I wouldn't cry. I would act. The morning light crept into the hotel room through half-drawn curtains. But I had been awake long before that. I sat on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, a folder on my lap, and fire in my chest. No more tears, no more waiting, no more hoping they'd come around. They had made their choice. Now I would make mine. I reached into my bag, pulled out the deed, the document they had signed with smiles and empty promises. The paper wasn't just a legal form anymore. It was my last line of dignity, and I was ready to defend it. I called my lawyer. Mr. Dunning had been my husband's friend, a man of few words but sharp instincts. When I explained everything, how I had loaned Marcus the money with the house as collateral, he didn't ask if I was sure. He just said, "You're ready." And I nodded, though he couldn't see me through the phone. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm ready." The next day I stepped into his office. The room smelled of leather and old books. Mr. Dunning looked up from behind his desk, eyes calm but alert. We sat down. He placed a fresh set of papers before me, formal notice of legal action. And as I picked up the pen, my hand didn't tremble. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't scared. I was steady. I was reclaiming what was mine. Not just the house, but my voice, my worth, my power. The pen clicked shut with a soft snap. I stared at the signature for a long time, my own name written in firm strokes across the bottom of the legal document. It was done. There would be no more second chances. No more, maybe they'll come to their senses. I had crossed the line, and for a moment, I couldn't tell what I felt more, sorrow or relief. I folded the papers slowly, the weight of them suddenly real in my hands. It wasn't just paper. It was a wall I had built to protect myself. From now on, I wouldn't beg to be seen. I would make them see. And yet a sharp ache pulsed in my chest. This wasn't the life I wanted. Not for me, not for Marcus, but it was the life they had chosen for me. I had tried, I had forgiven, I had waited. And still, they left me standing at a gas station like I was no one. As I stepped out of the lawyer's office, the afternoon sun warmed my face. For the first time in a long while, I felt something else besides heartbreak. Freedom. Not the kind that comes with joy. The kind that comes after letting go of the last thread, holding you to someone you loved. It hurts, but it also sets you free. Ruth knew that following through with legal action meant closing a door she'd always hoped would reopen. But this time, her decision was not fueled by spite. It was fueled by truth. She sat in her lawyer's office, calm but determined, and signed the papers that would officially call in the debt. Margaret, her lawyer, assured her that everything was done properly. Marcus and Rebecca would have 30 days to pay back the $80,000, or the house would be listed for forced sale. The moment the document was notarized, Ruth felt a strange mix of grief and relief. She had crossed a line, and there was no turning back now. When the letter arrived, Marcus tore it open at the kitchen counter. Rebecca was slicing apples for the kids. She looked up when she heard the silence. Marcus stood frozen eyes darting across the page. His lips moved, but no words came out. Then he slammed the letter down. She's suing us. Rebecca dropped the knife. The sound of metal hitting granite was sharp, jarring. What do you mean suing us? She whispered, already fearing the answer. Marcus held up the document with shaking hands. The house. The deed. She's reclaiming it. Rebecca's face went pale. The color drained from her cheeks as she stumbled backward and leaned against the counter. But she wouldn't. She's her. She's Ruth. Marcus's voice was low, full of disbelief. She's not the same anymore. They had underestimated her. They thought she was just an old woman clinging to memories. But now the past was knocking on their door, and it wasn't coming with cookies and smiles. It was coming with consequences. The phone rang at exactly 9:03 p.m. Unknown number. But I knew. It was him. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before I answered. My hand didn't tremble, but my heart did. Mom Marcus's voice cracked through the speaker, tight, wound up, like he had rehearsed this call all day. I said nothing, just breathed. Why are you doing this? He demanded, his voice rising. You sent us a legal notice, for God's sake. There it was. No apology, no remorse, just outrage. I held the phone close. You left me, Marcus, I said softly. Not just at that gas station. Long before that. There was silence, a hollow, heavy silence. We were struggling, he said finally. You were smothering us, always calling, always asking. We needed space. You needed space, I repeated. So you left me by the highway like a suitcase you forgot. His voice dropped. We didn't mean it that way. We thought you'd follow. We just needed a break. You didn't have to take it this far. That was the moment my tears came, but not from sadness. From fury. You thought I'd follow like a dog. I stood up. My voice shook, but it shook with power now. You used me. You lied. You watched me walk away from your house and let me believe everything was okay. Well, it wasn't. Now you deal with the consequences. Click. I hung up. The silence after the call was deafening, but it was clean, like fresh air after a storm. I stood in that hotel room, tears drying on my cheeks, heart still pounding. But for the first time, the pain didn't own me. I owned it. That night Ruth cried, not because she regretted her actions, but because she was mourning the illusion she had clung to for so long, the dream of a family that truly valued her. Marcus always had a way with words. He knew how to twist the truth just enough to make people doubt it. And Rebecca. She was better quiet, polished, and calculated. So when news of the lawsuit started to circle their neighborhood, they moved quickly. They painted me as unstable, forgetful, controlling. "She's lonely," Rebecca said to the neighbor's voice tinged with sympathy. "Ever since her husband passed. She hasn't been the same." "We didn't want to say anything," Marcus added, "but she's been struggling with memory issues. Sometimes she forgets what she agreed to." They started small, just whispers at the church, murmurs at the school gate. But lies spread like wildfire. Soon old friends stopped calling. People looked at me in the grocery store with polite, pitiful smiles. Even the woman at the bank hesitated before speaking to me. The world didn't see a betrayed mother. They saw a confused old woman causing drama, and that was the part that cut deeper than anything. I wanted to scream, to show them the documents, the messages, the truth. But I knew how it would look. They were young, attractive, a family. I was old, alone, bitter. That's how the world would see it. So I didn't scream. I prepared. It was a quiet morning. I had just poured myself a cup of tea, the aroma of jasmine filling my small kitchen. The radio hummed softly in the background, reading the headlines of a world that seemed far away from mine. I turned the page of the newspaper, and then the doorbell rang. Not once. Not twice. But 3 urgent chimes that broke through the calm like thunder. I opened the door, and my breath caught in my throat. Emma. Tyler. Emma was crying, cheeks wet and red. Tyler stood stiffly, arms crossed like a soldier trying not to shake. Behind them stood a woman, professional, calm, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Ruth," she asked gently, "I'm Sarah Chen. I'm with the Department of Child Protective Services." She paused. "We've received some concerns about the children's emotional well-being." For a moment, my whole world tilted. I looked down at my grandchildren, at those tiny hands I once held as they learned to walk. And now they were here not for a visit, not for cookies or bedtime stories, but for help. I stepped aside silently, and they entered. Sarah explained what she could. Teachers had noticed things, changes, withdrawn behavior. Emma wouldn't talk in class. Tyler flinched at sudden movements. One of them finally said something about the fights, the yelling, the fear at home. And then the agency stepped in. I wanted to scream, not in anger, but because I had known something was wrong, because I had let doubt and fear stop me from acting sooner. But it wasn't too late. Not for them. I made tea for Sarah, warmed blankets for the kids, sat beside them on the couch as Tyler finally let his head fall on my shoulder, and Emma curled into my lap like she used to. I didn't ask questions. I just held them. And in that moment, I didn't feel like a woman abandoned or betrayed. I felt like a grandmother again. That night, I didn't sleep. Not a second. Emma and Tyler had fallen asleep on the living room couch, their small bodies curled close together like they used to in story time. But this wasn't childhood anymore. This was survival. I sat at the kitchen table, the light above me buzzing softly, the tea cold and untouched. I stared at the papers Sarah left behind. Custody options, psychological evaluations, a temporary guardianship form. My hands hovered over the pen, and for the first time in weeks, I wasn't scared. I signed. I didn't do it to punish Marcus or Rebecca. I did it because those 2 little souls had been through enough. Because love, real love, protects. Even if it means standing alone. Even if it means going to war with your own family. The next morning I called Sarah. "I'm ready," I said. My voice didn't shake. Later that week, Marcus showed up at my door. Not with flowers, Not with remorse, but with fury. You turned my kids against me, he spat. You think you're some kind of hero? I didn't flinch. I didn't turn them, I replied. You did. Then I closed the door softly but firmly. Let the law speak now. Let the courts decide, because for once I had done what was right, and I would not apologize for it. The courtroom wasn't like the movies. No dramatic music, no shouting matches, just cold fluorescent lights, the smell of paper, and eyes watching your every word. I sat at the petitioner's table. Rebecca and Marcus sat across from me, back straight, dressed like a perfect couple, but their eyes couldn't hide it. The panic, the cracks in the mask. Sarah Chen was there too, calm, composed, armed with reports and school records. The judge, an older man with tired eyes, looked at us like we were all pages in a file folder. But I wasn't just paper. I was a grandmother fighting for her family. My hands were cold, but my spine was straight. I looked at Marcus, my little boy, my once shy son who used to cry when he lost his toys. And now he sat beside Rebecca, dressed like a businessman, but eyes like a cornered child. Did he remember what it felt like to be safe? Did he understand what he had become? They tried everything. Marcus claimed I was unstable. Rebecca cried softly, just enough to seem broken. They said I was manipulating the children, poisoning them against their parents. But then Sarah spoke. She read aloud the school counselor's report. Emma's drawing a house with no parents inside. Tyler's comment, I feel safe with Grandma. Mommy and Daddy shout too much. The courtroom went silent. The judge tapped his pen slowly, then looked directly at me. Why now, Mrs. Ruth? Why fight this now? I took a deep breath, because they need someone who won't leave them behind. The gavel didn't fall that day, but I knew the tide had shifted. Marcus stormed out. Rebecca didn't look back, but the kids. They ran to me, arms wide, hearts open. And in that moment, I didn't need a verdict. I already knew I'd done what was right. Nin. Walked through those courtroom doors with truth in one hand and love in the other. The court granted me temporary custody. It wasn't the end, but it was a beginning. There were forms to fill, interviews to attend, evaluations to pass. But through it all, the children were with me, safe, sleeping through the night, laughing again. Tyler started drawing. Emma began humming while doing homework. And the house, once echoing with silence, now carried the sound of life. I planted a garden in the backyard. Emma helped me with the herbs. Tyler insisted on tomatoes. We laughed when the dog dug up the first row. I wasn't the same woman I was a year ago. Not the grieving widow. Not the mother begging for a place at the table. I was standing now, firm, grounded, whole. Marcus never called again. Rebecca moved out of state. I don't know if they'll ever see what they lost, but I do know what I found. Love that doesn't demand, family that doesn't break, strength that doesn't shout but stands. Teen nurse? One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Emma turned to me and asked Grandma, "Are we going to be okay?" I looked at her. I thought about all we had been through, and sometimes strength doesn't come from raising your voice. It comes from knowing when to stand your ground, when to say, enough, when to protect the innocent, even if it means walking alone. Ruth didn't seek revenge. She sought peace. And in doing so, she gave 2 children a second chance at safety, love, and a home that listens. How many grandmothers would do the same? How many stories go unheard? If you've made it to the end of this story, thank you, not just for watching, but for listening, for opening your heart to a tale about family betrayal, strength, and healing. This wasn't just Ruth's story. It's the story of anyone who's ever been overlooked, forgotten, or left behind, and still found the courage to rise again. If you are someone who's been hurt by those you love, know this: you don't have to be loud to be strong. You don't have to be cruel to protect yourself. You don't have to carry shame for the actions of others. You have the right to say, "This ends with me," and start again with dignity and with love.